And I'm giving him this introduction not because he's my son, but because I really think that he is really good at what he's doing. And I'm not saying it as a mother, but I'm saying it as someone who uses his healing services all the time. And he helps me to heal. And I don't know what I would do without the acupuncture that I go for all the time. I haven't had it for a while. So he's acupuncture, and he's also a Chinese herbal medicine doctor. And he does create special formulas for people who are going through COVID-19 right now to help them, to help their bodies to push the virus out as soon as possible, to overcome it. So enjoy it, guys.
Thank you. Thank you for that introduction.
Yes.
Okay. So my mother did a great job introducing me. So I'm not going to spend too much time talking about myself. My name is Boris. I'm a Chinese medicine practitioner. I primarily work with herbs, breathing exercises, and acupuncture. These days, mostly herbs because we're on lockdown. And what I'm here to do today is to share a little bit of information about Chinese herbal medicine with you. We're going to break up today's short class into two parts. The first part, I'm going to give you a little bit of theory, and if that can sink in a little bit, that will be very flexible for you to go forward. And the second part, I'll just give you real practical, this does this kind of information. I just want to preface that all with saying, when we get to the practical part, even though something does something, or you can use, let's say, mint if you have a sore throat, that's not the only use of the herb, and it's not always appropriate to use it that way. However, I'm going to be giving you general advice. So a little bit about what I do with herbs. Depending on the kind of patient in front of me, I might be giving herbs in the raw format, which is, pieces of plant material or mineral material that then the patient would cook themselves. Or I have a pharmacy that creates encapsulated herbs, again, different formulas. Or pre-made herbal granulars, which is like instant coffee, but with herbs. It depends on what's going on with the person, whether or not they can take strong flavors, etc. The other thing I do is I make topical products, and my friend Roman and I have a company. We make this product called Dragon Blood Balm, and we actually designed it originally to be a hand recovery cream for rock climbers, and then apparently we underestimated how popular it would be. And my grandma uses it all the time, for example, for helping to fix her cracked skin that she gets when the weather is cold and dry. I just wanted to mention that because herbs can be used internally and topically. Also, I'm going to be raffling off a tin of Dragon Blood Balm today. Mickey's going to help me after this lecture to do so. So if you haven't commented and you want a chance to win, make sure you comment in the comments, and every comment is an opportunity to win. So let's get to the theory. What are Chinese herbs? Generally, we use the word herbs, but it applies to minerals as well, and in some rare cases, animal products. But for the focus of this, we're going to be talking about herbs and minerals. So a mineral is like salt or baking soda or iron, things like this. And the idea of Chinese herbs, how they work, is that they affect the qi in the body. You may ask, what is qi? That is a larger question that I can't answer exactly, but I'll try to give you a general idea. Qi is something in the body that describes relationships of movement. So for example, when we say qi can move up in the body, think about you're suddenly getting red in the face and embarrassed and warm ears when somebody is flattering you. So the qi is moving up in the body. Likewise, you're getting heartburn or reflux or burping. That's qi is moving up in the body. Let's say, pardon me, qi is moving down in the body. You suddenly feel lightheaded. Your head feels empty. or maybe you're going to the bathroom very frequently. So that's kind of an example of qi going down in the body. Qi can get stuck, qi can go out to the limbs, or qi can come in from the limbs. And we use herbs to affect that. About 2,000 years ago, maybe more, maybe less, some of these dates are a little bit contentious, but the theory of how flavor of herbs and food affects qi was laid out. And based on the flavor of a medicinal or of an ingredient in your kitchen, we can have some idea of how it will affect the movement of qi in your body and your health as a whole. I'm going to be really focusing on 3 or 4 of the flavors. Well, let's just go through all 5. So we have salty, we have bitter, we have sweet, we have spicy, salty, bitter, sweet, spicy, and I feel very embarrassed right now. I'm drawing a blank. Bitter, sweet, bland. So I apologize for that, but I drew a blank today for some reason. Anyway, so the 5 different flavors affect qi in different ways. So salty generally softens things. What that means exactly, don't worry about it too much. I'm going to go over this again and again a couple of times throughout the lecture. Acrid flavors or spicy flavors help things to move all around the body. Bitter flavors help things to kind of move down and out. So think about drinking a bitter tea or something like that if you're constipated. Kind of get things moving out. Or if you're drinking coffee or tea, like actual green tea, it's going to make you go to the bathroom a little bit more. You'll pee a little bit more. That's the bitter flavor. Sweet flavors tend to gather and slow down the movement of things. So think about if you eat a bunch of donuts, all the qi is going to gather in your belly. You're going to get a nice big belly. But actually, a more useful example is, let's say you're going to the bathroom a lot. If you eat something like sweet potato or butternut squash or rice, these are generally kind of sweet things, you can help to slow down that movement. And so we did salty, we did bitter, and bland is a flavor that kind of gently makes you go to the bathroom. So bland food can be something like, rice is somewhere between bland and sweet. Bland is a little bit harder food to pinpoint. A lot of foods we think of as bland are actually a little bit sweet. So we're not going to really talk about that one too much today. Additionally, other than the flavors, we have foods that are considered and herbs that are considered hot or cold. And that one's a little bit easier to understand sometimes and a little bit more difficult. But for the most part, what's the first herb that you think of if I say think of a hot herb? I think there's a lag, so I'm not going to wait for the comments. But if you thought pepper or ginger, that's a great example. Those are generally hot. Something cold is something like lemon. Mint is kind of cooling. So a lot of these are pretty intuitive. I'm going to go into detail about a few specific ones, and I'll give you some resources so you can look them up yourself later. Because we have hundreds and hundreds of different things we can use in the kitchen. Most of us probably only use like 5 or 10. I know I only use like 10. But depending on what you have in your own kitchen, you'll be able to look it up and have an idea of how it works. So let's say we want to make sure that things are moving up and out. We would use a spicy herb. So what does that mean? Let's say you feel like you overate or you're like things are stuck in your stomach. And we can consider using something like ginger. Ginger is going to be very warming and kind of moving. And oftentimes we use ginger to stimulate the digestive processes. Actually, to be honest, when I was doing the research for this presentation, I realized that pretty much, 70% of the herbs in my cabinet at least are used to stimulate digestion. And that makes perfect sense, doesn't it? Because these are traditional herbs that were passed down through many, many generations, through all sorts of cultures. And digestion has always been sort of the key point to health. We've heard, I'm not sure if you've heard it, but a thing I've heard over and over and over in my education is that let thy food be thy medicine. This was actually said by Hippocrates. This does not come from Chinese medicine. However, that concept is really deeply ingrained in Chinese medicine as well. So if we eat well and we eat seasonally and we spice our foods appropriately and we don't have any other kind of things that are very far outside of our control, we can generally maintain good health. Of course, there are always going to be more complications than that, but generally, if you eat well, eat seasonally, you can ensure that you'll be more healthy than if you didn't, at least. So we talked a little bit about that. So let's talk about that hot and cold thing. The hot and cold thing is really important, especially in diet. If you think about our body runs at about 98 degrees. That's pretty warm, and it likes to stay pretty warm. Generally, if you think about warm things, they're moving, they're active, they're alive. If you've ever composted something, you can see how steam comes off of the compost pile because life generates heat. When you exercise, when you get excited, generally things are warm. However, cold has its place. Cold is a lot more calming in a way, and we don't necessarily want to introduce too much cold into the body unless we have a lot of excess heat. But as I was saying, we don't want to introduce too much cold into the body in the forms of food. However, in our country, in the States, cold food is the go-to. Cereal with milk for breakfast, water with ice all the time, ice cream whenever there's whenever there's a chance. My friend was even jokingly telling me that his whole family has a second stomach just for ice cream. They can eat all they want of something else, and they've got a second stomach just for ice cream. I'm just listing foods that are physically cold, things that are coming from the fridge, but there are also foods that are, so-called energetically cold, like lemons and raw fruits, raw vegetables, smoothies. These things might be sparking ringing a little bit of bell for you guys. Sour. Oh, my grandma is so smart. That was the flavor I forgot. I can't believe I forgot the flavor sour. Since my grandma just reminded me, Alina Knopov is my grandma, I'm calling her out and thanking her immensely. Sour puckers things up and brings things in. It, in a way, like sweet, which slows things down and helps to gather, sour does it even more so. So if you eat a little bit of lemon, you know that feeling in your mouth of everything kind of squeezing together. Sour is actually a very useful flavor to help to hold down coughing because it gathers things down. That's why we use lemons oftentimes when we have a cold. And sour likewise helps to restrain excess movement. Too much sour can also be a bad thing because if you just hold everything in the middle, then your limbs can go cold, you won't get a good circulation, but let's not worry about that right now. So we were talking about cold foods, right? So cold foods, like I mentioned, smoothies, salads, cereal, ice cream, iced water, all of these things go into the body, and from a Chinese medicine perspective, can slow down the digestion. They cool down our insides, and they cool down an area that is supposed to be warm. And it's supposed to be warm so that it could actively break down whatever food you're giving it. If that area is too cold, it's going to have trouble digesting foods. That's why so many of our spices are spicy, aromatic, and warming, like clove and ginger and pepper. They help us to digest whatever food we're eating. So how can we use this knowledge to improve our diet? I'm seeing Lynn mentioning oregano. I'm going to come to oregano. That's a very interesting herb, and it's a very useful one. So how can we use this knowledge to improve our diet? So let's say, for whatever reason, you really love that smoothie in the morning. And as I mentioned, it's cold temperature-wise, plus it's raw and uncooked, so the food is in its most raw, cold state. Sometimes people throw ice in there even. Something we can add to that is ginger. And very commonly, it's actually added to a lot of juices and smoothies. But it's not just for the flavor. For the enjoying the flavor. It's also because ginger very much helps to improve the digestion. And ginger is very warming, and it helps to make that smoothie less cold and less potentially damaging to the stomach. Ice water is another one. I don't know how you make ice water better. I would drink regular room temperature water. It's something that's so ingrained in our society that it's really hard to change. However, you can make a point of making sure that the rest of your food is well spiced. And don't pour ice water right after you eat in your stomach, because if you're pouring something cold on top of something that should be hot, it's gonna kind of get stuck. If after you eat, let things stay warm in there. And if you really need ice water, drink it at a separate time. So I hope that gives you a little bit of an idea about the concepts of hot and cold in Chinese medicine. Hot and cold is very much straightforward, but it's very important to remember that generally our digestive system and metabolism needs to be on the warm side. That being said, there are instances when we can cool it down. For example, if we get very irritated and we get angry easily, and let's say our face is flushed, that's a great time to drink a glass of water. Maybe not ice water, but water or lemonade or something like this. It's going to help to cool you down a little bit. Mint tea in the summer will also help to cool you down a little bit. And, you could drink it as an iced tea or a hot tea, but either way, it's going to be helpful. Because in the summertime, we can definitely get overheated. Yeah, I see Lynn remembers Hippocrates. So depending on the situation, everything I'm saying is appropriate or not. So in the summertime, obviously, you can have a little bit more cooling things. But in the wintertime, I would go out of my way to avoid them. So what can we talk about next? We've already talked about the basic theory of the different movements of qi in the body. We've talked about how the flavors can affect those movements. We've talked about hot and cold and the impacts it can have on digestion. So let's give you a couple of examples you can use. We mentioned the thing with ginger and smoothies, but let's talk about ginger a little bit more. So ginger is probably my favorite herb / root. And it is incredibly flexible. So I'm going to give you a couple of applications for ginger. So let's say you just feel like you might be coming down with a cold. You don't really have a really strong fever. You don't have any strong symptoms yet, no sore throat, maybe just a little bit of a stuffy nose, a little bit of a chill. Now you could take a piece of ginger and, wash it, and with skin, chop it up finely and boil it. Add a little bit of lemon, just a little bit, just a little lemon juice in there, and you can drink that as a tea. So what the ginger does, it's very warming. And in Chinese medicine, we consider the skin of ginger to be a slightly more, an ingredient that affects the upper body a little bit more than just ginger by itself. So ginger affects more of the digestive system, and the skin affects more of the upper body. So together, they're going to be protecting the digestive system and affecting your lungs and your skin and everything like that. So it's going to help to decongest your nose. Maybe you'll break a little bit of sweat, and hopefully your immune system is otherwise strong enough, and you can prevent yourself from getting sick that way. So lemon is a little bit cooling and a little bit sour. So what it does is it restricts the movement of ginger so that the ginger is not moving too much. Also, if you think about lemon from a pharmacological perspective, lemon is high in vitamin C, and vitamin C has been shown to improve your immune system function and help to prevent colds. So how about if you're already sick and you don't have much of an appetite and you have some funny taste in your mouth and you feel cold? We can actually use ginger again, same way. I wouldn't necessarily put as much lemon in this case, and we can even peel the ginger and just focus on the meat inside. Boil it up, and if you want to be fancy, if you happen to have tangerines or nectar or mandarins in the house, you can throw in a little piece of the tangerine peel. So tangerine peel is one of the most used herbs in Chinese medicine. Generally, it's aged. However, what I have here is just some tangerines that I've been eating around the house, and I've been drying the skin because they make a nice tea. The Tangerine Peel Tea can help to stimulate the digestive system. It's slightly bitter and slightly aromatic. So remember, bitter moves things down and aromatic moves things up. So it kind of goes up and down in both directions, and it's warming. So together with that ginger, it's going to really benefit the digestive system. You can also use that as a little bit of a remedy if you overate, but I would make it less intensely hot. So if you're feeling cold and feverish, cold and you can't stand the wind and you have a million blankets on, you can brew that ginger strong. If you just overate a bit, you can throw a little bit of tangerine in there and just a little bit of ginger. You don't want it to be as hot, because if things are stuck and you add a lot of heat on top, then, stuckness and heat, that can really overheat. Think of a pressure cooker. We don't want that. We just want a little bit of that warming liquid to go in there and help to break things up. So ginger, tangerine peels, everyone has in the house. Let's talk about some of the more leafy herbs that we tend to have around. Oregano is a really interesting one. So if we smell oregano, it has like a nice cooling and slightly bitter smell to it. But it's definitely cooling. And, in my research, I've discovered that oregano is definitely a cooling herb. From a Chinese medicine perspective, it's considered to be cold and aromatic. So even though it's cold, generally we don't think cold moves too much, but the nature of this specific herb is that it's aromatic. From a pharmacological perspective, oregano is very antiviral and antibacterial. So this is traditionally used as a spice in a lot of different cultures, and it's used on a lot of different dishes. So these kinds of spices will provide a layer of protection, because throughout history we didn't always have refrigeration. My refrigerator is right there, that's why I'm pointing there. And our food might be a little spoiled, or might be exposed to the elements a little bit more. So by using these kinds of spices like oregano or basil, mint, not mint, but oregano, basil, these kinds of things, we can help to prevent the likelihood of getting upset stomach or getting some sort of food poisoning from spoiled food. Another herb that's very commonly used for that specific purpose, for its antiviral functions. Most people don't think about it, but clove is immensely antiviral in its properties. From a Chinese medicine perspective, clove is almost the opposite of oregano, because it's actually very warm and it's actually hot. And rather than going up, it's a little bit more kind of moves downwards. Clove is traditionally used when we cook different sorts of savory foods like meats, because the functions of the properties of clove seem to help with preventing food poisoning from those kinds of things. It seems to kill parasites rather than bacteria. But we don't need to think about it that way. I don't want to get too caught up in the words antiviral and antibacterial and antifungal, these words, because the best way to learn about how to use these spices is to look at the cultures that they come from and look at the types of recipes that they're used in traditionally. A lot of that wisdom is sort of innate in a lot of those recipes. I want to share a book with you. This actually is my wife's book. She didn't write it, but she bought this book, and I think it's a really fantastic resource, because what it does is it shares some very traditional recipes. These are largely Chinese, but you can find something similar for a lot of different cultures. And what it does is it breaks down the recipe, breaks down the ingredients, and then it kind of gives you a breakdown of what we can use it for. So if we were to be using the food as medicine, let's say this dish, Japanese style greens. It's especially good for anyone suffering with high blood pressure, headaches, and dizziness, or if someone ate too much alcohol. So this dish combines greens, oil, vinegar, soy sauce, and it helps to kind of the book helps to explain the different functions of each herb and each food product in that recipe. So I think that's a great resource. I'm going to put it in the show notes along with the website that I was talking about. So if we're looking for guidance, more specific guidance, I would look to traditional recipes. So if we think about Indian food, for example, pretty much any Indian dish that isn't too spicy, like spicy hot, can be considered to be good for the digestion. One second. They're full of things like fennel and clove and ginger and turmeric. All of these things really benefit the digestive system. So oftentimes I actually tell my patients with digestive issues who have gained too much weight or who have trouble losing weight and have upset stomach, I would tell them to look up some Indian recipes or eat Indian food. Just make sure that you're not ordering it too spicy. Things should be flavorful and spiced, but not overly hot. And in general, that's a good rule of thumb. Let's talk about that cold salad. What can we do to make a salad a little bit less cold? If we think about the traditional dressings for a salad, oftentimes we'll even use, we'll use balsamic vinegar. So vinegar actually helps to start breakdown and helps to promote digestion. But if we want to make it even more easy to digest, we can think about the kind of salad we get in a Japanese restaurant. It often comes with a citrus ginger dressing. So citrus, as I mentioned before, the citrus peel and ginger are really good for stimulating digestion. So if we're going to be putting something cold in the body, by combining it with something warming, something digestive stimulating, it can create a little bit of balance. So that's one way you can start thinking about it. Now, we've talked about vegetables, we've talked about roots. I want to talk about a fruit. So pears and apples are two really, really useful fruits because they taste really good, one, and two, they can be really soothing to the throat. So if you have, let's say you've recovered from a cold, but your throat is still kind of irritated and you have this bit of a chronic cough, or let's say you have very dry heating in your apartment because you live in New York, or let's say you're a little bit older and you just happen to have a chronic dry cough and you're not particularly sick or anything like that, baking some pear with a little bit of honey and cinnamon and eating this, not all the time, but a couple of times a week, can be something very nice and moistening, and it can give you immediate relief topically because as you eat it, it's going to soothe the throat, but also over time it can help to build back up a little bit of the moisture. So that's a really great recipe that honestly I don't use enough because I just like pears raw and I end up eating them. That being said, pears and apples raw are a little bit cold, so if you eat too many, you can hurt your stomach a bit. The next thing we're going to talk about is turmeric. So turmeric is a really, really frequently used herb in people who are interested in health and health cultivation these days. Everyone's talking about add turmeric to this, it's antioxidant, anti-this, anti-that. What I wanted to mention today is that, yes, turmeric is really great for the digestion and it's good for the circulation. And a lot of times we can actually take like a pill of turmeric extract or turmeric instead of, or in addition to taking a pain reliever, let's say if we have a sore muscle or we pulled something. I wanted to give you a very simple herbal tea recipe where you would combine a spoonful of turmeric and a spoonful of cinnamon powder, mix it together, add some boiling water. You can strain it out or drink it all together. So the cinnamon is acrid, and in Chinese medicine, we often use cinnamon twigs to affect the joints. I'm not going to go into the detail of the why there, but I'm just letting you know. And combined with turmeric, they really help with arthritis and joint pain, and it can even help with back pain. The same turmeric can be used as a topical medicine. So what I was going to do here is help show you how to make that kind of topical medicine. I'm going to tilt my camera down a little so you can see my table. So what we're going to do, we're going to start with a spoon of turmeric. we're gonna sprinkle in a little bit of cayenne pepper. So as I do this, I'm gonna tell you about cayenne pepper. Cayenne pepper is not a Chinese medicinal, but it is a very common it's a very common thing that a lot of people have in their kitchens. And one of the essential ingredients, not ingredients, the components of pepper is something called capsicum. And this is something that is a topical numbing agent. A lot of times, if you ever get one of those anti-pain patches in a pharmacy, that extract is part of the ingredients. So it's in there. That's one of the reasons that sometimes people like really spicy foods, because it kind of numbs the mouth, and we can use this topically as well. So if you noticed, I only put a little bit of that. I have a little oregano. I'm gonna sprinkle a tiny bit of oregano in there too, because oregano has a little bit of that also numbing effect. So we'll mix those together. I believe I included this recipe in the show notes slightly differently, but I didn't have my cloves ground and I didn't have fennel ground today, so I don't want to, I don't want to take too much time to do that on camera. The last thing we do is we add a little bit of honey. And what the honey does, it acts to bind up all of those powders into a paste. You can just add it in and mix it up. Additionally, honey helps topically to reduce inflammation. From a Chinese medicine perspective, honey is sweet and it slows things down. So we can think of it this way, that it kind of gathers things to the area. Frequently, honey is used for its antimicrobial properties. So if there's antimicrobial and anti-inflammatory properties. So it's beeswax is one of the main ingredients in Dragon Blood Balm, and beeswax has very similar properties. So now we have this nice paste, and let's say, the reason we'd be making this is because it's pandemic and you're stuck indoors, and let's say you were working out a lot and you hurt your elbow because you haven't done weight training before, and suddenly you're doing a lot of weight training. You can just kind of spread it on there and leave it. You can cover it with a paper towel or something like that, and you can leave it on for a couple of hours. So things to notice, to pay attention to if you're doing something like this, you might start to feel a little bit of tingling, especially from the red pepper. That's normal, but if it gets uncomfortable at any point, wash it off with soap and water, and then just let it rest. So that's one thing. I'm going to try to be very careful not to get that on my white pants. So that's a way we can make a topical application of herbs that you have in your kitchen and help with something like pain. You can additionally massage it in. It's a little bit messy, but you can always wash your hands. You're not going anywhere right now. You're stuck at home. So another really interesting application of mineral substances. I mentioned we're going to talk about minerals. It's really simple, and you may already know it, but I just wanted to talk about it a little bit more. So when you go to the hospital, hopefully you don't, but oftentimes people go to the hospital and there's a wound or a cut. One of the first things they do is wash it out with salt water. So salt has a lot of really nice cleansing properties. As I mentioned, salty flavors help to soften things. So they help to kind of break away any like stuck nodules, or let's say you have some like a cut and it's inflamed. You can use salt water to clean it, as well as hydrogen peroxide and rubbing alcohol. But salt water can be a nice thing to clean it first. But another place where we sometimes get kind of stuck nodules is in our throat. So let's say we have a sore throat, and if you look in the back of the throat, it's red and a little swollen. A really simple recipe that I've been using since I'm a little kid, that my grandma showed me, my mom showed me, is to take some salt, maybe a teaspoon, and some baking powder, baking soda, another teaspoon. So those are 2 minerals. Add some hot water. Mix it up nicely. And you can use that as a gargle for your throat. So the salt and the baking soda are two relatively salty substances. So they go in and cool and soften everything that's going on there. So if it's swollen and kind of hard to swallow and the airways are constricted, this can kind of give you a little bit of relief. I'm just going to step away from the screen for 1 second. I'll be right back. I apologize, I got some of that turmeric on my hands. I wanted to wash it. Okay, so we've talked about the topical application. We've talked about a nice trick for a throat gargle. Another thing you can actually add in here is the oregano because of the same properties I mentioned earlier. So while we're talking about this upper respiratory, the throat and things like this, I wanted to share another really kind of, in a way it's obvious, but it's really important. Mint tea. Everyone has mint tea, but mint is a very cooling herb and it can be very soothing, especially if you combine it with something also cooling like lemon and something a little bit sweet like honey. Honey has a physical texture. It's a little bit slippery and it helps to create a nice coating in the throat. So really it can be a very nice cough remedy to have some oregano, some mint, honey, and lemon all mixed together and you can drink that. You don't have to drink the herbs themselves, you can just drink the tea of that. So I just wanted to give you an example there of how you can use the different herbs in your kitchen. I'm going to take another minute and go through the most important part that I think I want you to take away from today. Essentially, if we look at traditional recipes, we'll notice that most of the foods have lots and lots of spices, and spices were always actually treasured because they are not only delicious, but they help to stimulate digestion and ensure health. They help to cultivate a good microbiome. I know yesterday the nutritionist who was on was talking about that, and spices is one of the, using proper spicing in your food, not just eating processed foods, but using food that you make yourself with nice spices is one of the best ways to cultivate a healthy microbiome. I actually included a really great book in the show notes. It's called Enlighten Weight. One of my teachers, his name is Andrew Miles, actually wrote that book. And the purpose of that book is to be a layman's guide to Chinese medicine and Chinese medicine, how to incorporate it in your diet and in your life. It's a really great book. It goes into more detail about that. While I still have you guys here, I want to open up the floor for any questions. I'm going to pull up Facebook on my phone so I can see the questions more quickly because we're having a little bit of the delay from what you guys are saying there to what I'm receiving here. So I'm not seeing any questions, or maybe the delay is that much. I'm just going to give it another 1 minute.
So, hi, Boris, thank you so much for this very informative.
So I couldn't tell, were there any questions on the Facebook feed?
I'm not sure. I'm not saying any question. What else can you use that on?
Are you talking about?
I'm reading the question. So will it take down inflammation from the sore or something? So.
Oh, okay. So I think there's too much of a delay to actually have this live question and answers. But if you leave the questions in the chat, I will respond to you by message. Okay?
Oh,
so
okay.
I'll respond to each message individually, and I'll explain what else we can use the mixture on in this case.
Okay, that's awesome. Boris, thank you so much. Would you share with people how they can find you and what else, like how can they have continuation of this conversation? And
Sure. So right now, the best way to contact me is by email. And my email is boris@361acupuncture.com. It's in the show notes, and I'll include it in the comments as well. As far as what I do and what we can do together, I'm a Chinese herbalist, as I mentioned, and if you have any health goals that you'd like to achieve, right now is actually a very good time to work on yourself, while you're stuck at home and you actually have the luxury of time. I would be happy to work with you. I would be guiding you with herbal medicine. I would be guiding you with nutritional advice. I would potentially be giving you breathing exercises to do. So if anyone's interested in booking an appointment, I'd be happy to talk to you. You can just reach out to me at the contact information that I provided in the notes.
Okay, and will you drop on your event? Can you drop that information in the Dragon Balm? Because a few people asked me.
Absolutely, I'll drop that information. And do we want to do the raffle now or later? I can see. Let's see.
Yeah. So hold on one second. I'm going to bring Mickey back.
So I'm going to raffle this off.
So
Everybody.
we do it later when we do the raffle.
That's totally up to you. I put the names of the people that were viewing and that were commenting and had questions separate.
Yeah, we can do it now. We have like 2 minutes or so.
All right.
You can tell Mickey where to pull then.
I put it in this cute pink box because my theme is pink today. All right. So reach in there, reach in there, reach in there.
In there, yeah.
Oh, you almost got it. Oh, you got one.
Yeah.
All
Okay.
right. And the
You read
name is
Oh my God, that was so perfect.
Betsy Bleecker.
Betsy, I think Blecker, B-L-E-C-K. I'd have to look again, but E-E or E-C-K.
All right. Well, Betsy, I'll just reach out to me so I can get your shipping information, and I'll ship that out to you as soon as I can tomorrow.
Perfect.
Are you with us?
Thank you, Boris.
Leave us a comment if you're here. It's very exciting. Congratulations.
All righty. Take care, guys. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. Thank you for being here.
My pleasure.